Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I believe I have a PowerPoint as well. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee. Representative Greg Chaney, District 10 Caldwell, here to present House Bill 195. I'd like to begin by reflecting on some of the things that House Bill 195 does not do. House Bill 195 does not prohibit protest. It defines areas that are less appropriate for protest. House Bill 195 does not eliminate picketing. It defines an area that is inappropriate for picketing. House Bill 195 is not new. It's new to us in Idaho, but in your OneDrive you have an article on Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri. And if you scroll down to where I left a yellow dot on your PDF, you'll see that the criminal complaint filed arises from a Missouri state law that says picketing is illegal in front of a residence. You'll also see in that article where Senator Hawley's wife and children were home alone when the picketers arrived. The prohibited conduct was not dependent on any sort of volume or threat. Prohibited conduct is about picketing in front of a residence. What you have in front of you is language that in and of itself has been tested, tried, and succeeded through the courts. This legislation, and I'll allow Representative Green to speak to it more directly, but we drew from other states that were involved. The intent language is aimed at excluding and not inadvertently outlying other protected activities, such as canvassing, door-to-door sales, and the like. It also is intended to exclude those who may inadvertently picket or demonstrate, or make it clear that simply stopping in front of a house by itself isn't picketing. The intent language does not accidentally discourage all picketing. It is intended to be a modifier of the picketing or demonstrating so that it is truly picketing and demonstrating that we are capturing. My role here in this presentation, at least initially, is to set the stage for where we're at, and I'd like to do that by setting the stage for where we have been with some context. I want everyone to be heard, whether they agree with me or not, but I'm going to, including those who are in the building today, irrespective of their vitriol or their personal opinion of me. But I emphasize the word everyone, because when we turn the volume up this hot on political discourse, we crowd out anybody not willing to be equally as confrontational, angry, loud, or violent. And we've been there before. We've seen this before. Now, I believe that most everyone who is engaged in demonstration has done so with noble motives in mind. But I would like to share with you some points in history where other persons demonstrated with noble motives in mind and ended up turning the heat up so loud or so high on political discourse that there were problems. But first, I would like to prepare you to hear two things today that aren't true. You're likely to hear that picketing at homes is necessary because it's the only place left for people to protest. Something along the lines of, if we're going to go to Zoom meetings, then you create a situation where you can't protest at the meeting. And Idaho law does require there to be a physical presence at the headquarters that would allow for protest, but I'll address that further in a moment. You'll also hear that arriving at homes is not intimidation. When I introduced this bill, I was prepared to come here and tell you that this had never happened to me, but I was sufficiently angry on behalf of the people that it happened to. And I guess I should pause, though, now to share a Rule 80, because I'd like to present to you evidence that those two statements that I just made, that it's not about intimidation, and it's only necessary because there's no other place to protest, are untrue. This is a screenshot I received. The blued out area is my home address. This was posted yesterday. After we posted the agenda showing a 4 o'clock adjournment of this committee, I've been in this building nearly every day of the legislative session. There have been plenty of places that I could have been protested. We publicly posted an agenda with a 4 o'clock adjournment. It is not possible for me to get home by 4:30, not in that traffic. So if it's not about intimidation, then why is it being scheduled at a time when only my wife, my children, and my Labradoodle would be home? You can mess with me all you want, but knock it off, for goodness sake. Again, I'm not trying to demonize anybody, but even the Nazi Party started with good-intentioned persons who were frustrated. And they were used over time to allow bad people to take power. How so? The brown shirts of the stormtroopers, they were private citizens initially. They eventually got absorbed into the government. They believed they were doing the right thing. They provided security to Nazi Party events, including speeches by Adolf Hitler, and they interrupted by force meetings being held by those with whom they disagreed. They were legitimized by government, but then their leadership was killed one night when they got too strong. They remained in existence but weakened because after they had helped people move forward, they themselves were marginalized. Fast forward 30 years. Maoist China, the Red Guard, well-meaning idealistic college students were called upon by Mao to rebel against the four olds, the old customs, the old culture, the old habits, the old ideas. They went house to house, dragging people into the street. Mao himself issued an order that the police not intervene. It was your first autonomous zone. They tore down and destroyed cultural icons in the interest of making a new China. Again, these were not evil people. They were frustrated, well-meaning people. I could show similar slides, though I didn't prepare them, on the revolution.
Could I interrupt you just one moment? The video is out, and so I think we need to go into recess until the video is back
Very
up.
well.
Sorry. Thank you for being patient, and I think we're up and going, and we're going to push because we'd really kind of like to get through this and possibly on to voting before we go to the floor. So we're going to move it on. Back to you, Chairman Chaney.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Let me just wrap up that previous point by saying that when well-meaning people engage in confrontational politics, it gives opportunity for not so well-meaning people to come to power. At this time, I would like to yield to my co-sponsor, Representative Brooke Green, to explore the genesis of the bill. Representative?
Thank you. Representative Green, the floor is yours.
Yes, and thank you, Chairwoman and committee. For the record, Representative Green, out of District 18. It's a privilege to be before you. Primarily, it's a privilege to finally address this. This past year has tested the relationship shared between government and its people. We've seen the dialogue shift from our places of business to our very own doorsteps. It's unfortunate it's come down to this, that for us to protect the sanctity of our home, we actually have to have this discussion. These events have played out in our very own communities, where respected community members found themselves held captive in their homes by angry protesters expressing their rage for simply doing their jobs. This didn't occur just to elected officials. This played out in front of law enforcement homes, county and city employees. Each of these individuals, the common denominator was they all had a place of business somewhere else, and their place of business was not their doorstep. These families had to endure several sleepless nights while complete strangers lurked in the darkness outside their house. They had to shuttle their children out their back door so they could actually not see the objectionable language that was occurring on the sidewalk. For what? What exactly were they trying to achieve? If not only to remind the occupants of the homes, the fearful spouses, the terrified children, that they're not safe. They're not safe in their very home in which they retreat to. The legislation before you is a novel, as Representative Chaney had brought up. It may be new to Idaho, but it's certainly not new around the United States. I'm going to just run off a couple states that have similar legislation on the books. Virginia, Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, North Carolina. Virginia code specifically says those who engage in picketing before or about the residence of a dwelling, place of an individual, which disrupts or threatens an individual's right to tranquility in their home. Arizona, residential picketing, if and when the intent to harass, annoy, or alarm another person, such as intentionally engaging in picketing or otherwise demonstrates before, about the residence or dwelling. Let's go down to North Carolina. When the person knows or should know that their picketing would cause a reasonable person to fear for their safety or the safety of their immediate family, personal associate, or cause substantial emotional distress. Let's pause there just for a moment. Substantial stress. What about those poor children who are getting shuttled out their back door because protesters are showing up on their doorstep, that they can't go out their front door to go for a walk or walk their dog, see their childhood friend down the street? What do you think that's doing on their emotional well-being? And lastly, currently in our neighboring state, Utah has just introduced its legislation and it has reached its first reading. This isn't the first time the Idaho legislature has addressed this questionable speech, as several of us can recognize that even protected speech is not equally permissible in all places and all times. In 2007, Idaho added to its Disturbing the Peace statute a provision that makes it a misdemeanor for anyone who willfully disrupts a memorial service, a funeral procession, or a burial ceremony. This provision was added in Idaho and 45 other states following the egregious behavior of picketing soldiers' funerals. Our society has been grappling this for generations. Where do we draw the line? Where does your right to free speech infringe on my rights for my family's well-being, the tranquility, and the privacy at our homes? As addressed in Frisbee and Schultz, the First Amendment permits the government to prohibit offensive speech as intrusive when the captive audience cannot avoid the objectionable speech. Furthermore, they go on to note the unique nature of our home as the last citadel of the tired, the weary, and the sick. Preserving the sanctity of our home, the one retreat to which men and women can repair, they can escape the tribulations of their daily pursuits, is surely an important value. I'll leave you with this. If the last place that we can all retreat to is our home. Where else, if we can't go home, are we to go? What we have before you, as brought up before, isn't new. This isn't some legislation that we thought up because we saw our friends, our colleagues, our neighbors get terrorized in their homes. Other states have already done this. The unfortunate thing is we're having to do this because what is unfolding in our homes and in our communities. And it's not just a certain group of individuals. We're seeing this across the spectrum. It is up to us to be able to restore that tranquility of our homes and ensure our community members, not just elected officials. It could be that publisher who printed in the newspaper the wrong article. This provides them protection. It's the barber, it's the dentist, it's the cop. We are instilling that they can go home, tuck their families into their beds, and ensure that what occurs on their doorstep isn't going to be intrusive. So with that being said, I'm going to yield my time. We're open for questions. I'll call Representative Chaney back up here. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Green.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I will make my next points quicker than I was planning on. I was going to spin a yarn about going on recess here in the committee and using the restroom and having somebody kick open the door and take issue with you over your vote on the floor this morning, as an illustration of the fact that there are places where protest and privacy just don't mix. But I won't labor there. This is Frisbee v. Schultz. Representative Green referenced it earlier. It is in your OneDrive. It is from 1988. That we are often captives outside the sanctuary of the home and subject to objectionable speech does not mean we must be captives everywhere. What about our disturbing the peace statute? Well, what about it? Here in State v. Poe in 2004, the Idaho Supreme Court invalidated the obscene speech portion of our statute. And in so doing, they commented that although the government can, by a narrowly drawn statute, constitutionally prohibit the intrusion of unwelcome speech into individuals' homes, vis-a-vis Schultz, this statute is not narrowly tailored to protect that interest. Unlawful assembly requires loud and boisterous conduct. My final point is this is not confined to elected officials. I was watching a show on television last night with my wife. This guy had been wrongfully accused of murder that he had absolutely nothing to do with, didn't even know the person, and we just addressed that issue here. But now in the social media age, his face, his address, everything was put out there. He was harassed endlessly to the point of a suicide attempt. Mob rule is not appropriate, whether you're the falsely accused, elected official, or a police officer. This bill has been crafted in such a way that does not specifically target political speech. It targets all speech. So all picketing,